समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In the early hours of Friday, which is June 13th, Israel launched a major offensive against Iran in what has been dubbed Operation Rising Lion. This preemptive military action targeted Iran's nuclear infrastructure and eliminated several top figures in its military hierarchy, including Major General Hossein Salami, the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. The attack occurring just days before scheduled US-Iran talks, in fact, just 48 hours, which is 2 days before the US-Iran talks in Oman, on reviving the nuclear deal, has dramatically escalated tensions across the Middle East and beyond. Here's a clear breakdown of what happened, why it happened, and what it means geopolitically. So let's start with what happened. Israel's airstrikes struck multiple strategic sites across Iran, including the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility, long seen as the nerve center of Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now, according to Israeli and independent intelligence reports, the strikes have also targeted key military and scientific personnel associated with the Iranian nuclear program and the IRGC, which is Iran's elite paramilitary force. Notably, the IRGC chief, Major General Salami, has been confirmed to be killed, a move Tehran is certain to interpret as an existential provocation. Now, needless to say that Iran has retaliated by launching over 100 Shahed 136 drones in a counterattack. While most drones were intercepted, thanks to a combination of Israeli defense systems and possibly covert assistance from regional actors like Jordan and even Saudi Arabia, Israel has declared a state of emergency and closed its airspace. The reason is quite on the edge. Now, the question is, why did Israel strike now? And there are several converging factors that have created what Israel saw as a narrow but urgent opportunity. Let's talk about intelligence and timing. Despite strategic warnings that Israel might act, Iran appeared unprepared, at least from what has happened. That Israel could strike and eliminate top brass yet again, despite Iran's high alert posture, speaks to the depth of Israeli intelligence inside Iran and the advanced capabilities of modern warfare technologies as well as modern intelligence gathering. The second factor is about Iran's nuclear enrichment. The most pressing issue is Iran's nuclear enrichment. According to a 31st May 2025 report published by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is IAEA, Iran has amassed over 408 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% of purity, which is just below the weapons grade. Now, this was a 50% increase since February 2025. Now, experts say this amount is sufficient to make multiple nuclear weapons if further enriched to the 90% level. Iran's enrichment activities have outgrown the constraints of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, a deal which was meant to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities in exchange for sanctions relief. So the sanctions were lifted, and this is by the Obama administration. After then, President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from the agreement in 2018. Iran steadily escalated its nuclear program. Now, with Donald Trump back in the White House and rumored to be pursuing a new deal with Iran, Israel acted preemptively, fearing that any deal would not roll back Iran's existing capabilities and thus would be an existential threat to Israel. And here we must talk a little bit about Trump's foreign policy style as well. Trump's reputation for impulsive deal-making and disregard for allied interests has long unnerved Israel. How Trump is treating Europe is definitely a case in point. His exit from the 2015 JCPOA in 2018 without a plan B, and the subsequent failure to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions have only reinforced Israeli fears. Now, talks in Oman between US and Iranian officials, slated to occur 48 hours after the strike, were reportedly focused on a new arrangement. But Israeli officials viewed any likely deal as insufficient to reverse Iran's nuclear progress. The concern in Jerusalem was clear. Once Iran crossed the nuclear threshold, even a nominal agreement would be meaningless. So, what are the strategic implications? Let's start with Iran. This was not just a strike on nuclear sites. It was a decapacitation attack on Iran's military hierarchy and the very ideology. By targeting and killing senior military leaders, Israel may be attempting to induce internal disarray within the Iranian regime. The IRGC, which reports directly to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is the region's ideological and military backbone. A successful hit on its top leadership could force Khamenei to consolidate power in haste, potentially fracturing command structures. Additionally, this comes after nearly 2 years of Israeli-led attritional warfare against the so-called Axis of Resistance, which is Iran's network of proxy forces, the 3H, the Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Now, Hamas's leadership was decimated after October 7, 2023. Hezbollah's senior commanders were also targeted. By striking Iran indirectly, Israel has escalated its campaign from proxies to principle. And now let's also talk about the global and regional reactions. Now, while most regional actors, for example, Saudi Arabia or UAE, etc., have professed neutrality and have asked both sides to de-escalate, the following positions are important to note. What about United States? Despite Trump's silence on direct coordination, the Pentagon had already moved to protect American assets by evacuating staff from embassies in Baghdad, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Trump's subsequent statement on social media urging Iran to give up on its nukes is not likely to deter either Iran or Israel. And now at this juncture, let's talk about India. What is India's strategic calculus? Now, India has abstained from a United Nations General Assembly resolution condemning the attack, signaling strategic ambiguity and neutrality. However, this reflects more than mere fence-sitting. And this is certainly a situation which is uncomfortable for India. But let's unravel it a little bit more. India has deep ties with both Israel and Iran. On one hand, it benefits from Israel's advanced defense technology and partnerships through strategic platforms like the I2U2, which is a grouping of India, Israel, UAE, and USA, and the connectivity project such as IMEC, which is India, Middle East, Europe Corridor. On the other hand, India has invested heavily in Iran's Chabahar port for regional connectivity and is eager to resume oil imports, given a choice, which were halted due to US sanctions in 2018. Additionally, Indian shipping interests have suffered from Houthi control over the Bab el-Mandab Strait and the Red Sea crisis. India wants Iran weakened enough to disrupt its proxy networks, especially the Houthis, but stable enough to avoid prolonged chaos, especially around the INSTC and Chabahar plans. What about Russia? Russia, which has leaned heavily on Iran in Syria and shares anti-Western interests, faces a strategic dilemma. With Iran enfeebled, Assad isolated and defeated, in fact, Assad ousted, and proxies weakened, Russia's broader ambitions in the Middle East are also at risk. In fact, if you look carefully, all of Russia's partners in the region right now are weakened. This is going to reshape the power dynamics, not only in the region, but also in Moscow's future military calculus and geopolitical calculus. So finally, what lies ahead and what are the key questions? At this stage, there are certain questions that need our attention. Can Israel dismantle Iran's nuclear infrastructure entirely? Natanz has been struck, but Fordow, which is Iran's deeply buried enrichment site in the mountains, remains operational. The second question is, will Iran also escalate enough to involve American forces or allies? Thus far, retaliation has been limited to drones, etc. If Tehran hits US assets in the region, the conflict could spiral really uncontrollably. The third question to ponder is, will the regime survive these repeated attacks? Now, while the Islamic Republic of Iran has withstood sanctions, protests, and foreign sabotage, but this direct targeting of military leadership may test its endurance like never before. And finally, can diplomacy survive this escalation? Now, talks with the US do not really seem to be happening anytime soon, at least not in the way they were planned. Whether this leads to Iran doubling down on its nuclear enrichment or seeking an off-ramp remains uncertain for now. Needless to say, I'll be back to discuss that and more. Stay tuned.